Hello, everyone. I believe you all seen Shrek, I believe. So there's this discussion between Shrek and the donkey about layers. We believe that not only ogres and onions have something in common, we believe that also tests have layers. So actually it's, for me, fourth time when I'm here at Mobilization. For you, Oleg?
It's my second time.
Yeah, but for both of us, it's the first time when we are speaking, so we are very happy to be here and very excited. So thanks to the organizers for accepting our talk. So we work together in Allegro, in the same team, in the same, on the same project, which is iOS application for buyers. Maybe you know this app. And today we wanted to make our presentation possibly practical, based on our experience. That's why we chose 8 real issues that we experience in our work in Allegro, and 8 different layers of testing that helped us to overcome these problems. So this presentation is not about showing you the perfect approach for testing or how to create bug-free software, because it's not about it. We want to share with you our experience with the mistakes we've made and to share the lesson we learned. Of course, we are still have a lot of things to improve, but we believe that learning through your mistakes is the right thing to do. Okay, great. So let's dive into first layer of testing. So some time ago, we had a problem on production. It was crash, and it was caused by the problem illustrated in this code. So actually, I would like to pay a little bit of attention and ask you if you some code smell here, if you see that something may be possibly wrong. There was a presentation about code smells by Tomek, so I'm sure you, you all know. Exactly, this is a force unwrap. So in this case, it will work perfectly, but in the case we would like to use it in this way, the application will crash, because force unwrap, I'm saying, okay, I'm sure that the variable will never be nil, so it will always have a value. But in the case the value will be actually nil, the app will crash. So we know that force unwrapping, sometimes it can be applied, like for example with an IB outlet, for example. But we know that this is the technique that should be used carefully with a conscious. So we were thinking how we could automatically detect using force unwrap, for the future, to prevent such a crashes like that. So we thought about using linter for Swift. So we chose SwiftLint, which is quite natural choice. Of course, we didn't SwiftLint all the things like here, but we started with an incremental approach. So we started with a basic set of rules. It's called the SwiftLint is created by Realm, and they have these few approaches. They call it, for example, this approach is called incremental code stylist. Because our code base is quite big and we have many developers working on the project, we started with a tiny set of rules, and we want to increment it within the time. We also use the same version of SwiftLint, so it's actually put in our repo. So we don't have to download it manually. It also helps us to have the same version. And we also had a really long discussion about autocorrection, but I think it's not the time for talking about this right now. And as far as this crash I was talking about is concerned, I was actually trying to reproduce it. And because it was dependent on the data that is coming from the backend, it was quite hard to reproduce. So I was struggling a lot, and then I learned that this kind of struggle has a name, and it's called Heisenbug. Have you heard about Heisenbug? Could you please give me the definition of Heisenbug? I know that you probably experienced it many times in your developer's life. Exactly. This is really frustrating, isn't it? Yeah, I really don't like this situation, but unfortunately it happens a lot. So exactly, as you said, Heisenbug is a bug that alters behavior or sometimes disappears when you try to reproduce it, when you try to work on it. It's a joke, pun, on the name of physicist Werner Heisenberg, who stated the observer effect. So the act of observing a system actually alters its state. So yeah, I think that it didn't change my life, but at least I know the name for this kind of bugs. Great. OK, so we talked about first layer. Let's move to the second one. Again, I would like to show you some code. We have this parser, like you, Tomek, you also talked about parser. So there's this simple function parse that has 3 parameters. The string to parse and 2 closures, success and failure. What the function does is, for every non-empty string, it's just called success closure. When the string is empty, the failure closure is being called. But what is more interesting for us is the test that is actually checking if for sure for string parsing will succeed. If the parsing succeeds, we do nothing, so test will just pass. If the parsing fails, we use xct fail, so test will fail. Again, I would like to ask you, so there's one also important thing to mention, that the success closure is called asynchronously. And I would like to ask you about some code smell here. If you see, if this test is actually checking something, if it will work, or rather no. So
I think that the fact that this is async test will always pass, because the failure closure will never, the success closure is called async, so test can time. No.
Yeah, I think your idea is quite good, because the problem here is that the success closure is being called asynchronously. And this test is more likely to complete before the actual parsing will complete. That is why this kind of test is, I call it evergreen unit test, because it will always pass, regardless of the code logic. If I would, for example, put failure here, it would pass anyway, because it would just complete before the asynchronous call will complete. So it will always give us the false positive results. So these kind of tests are unreliable. And the proper test that could be written, this is the one with the expectation that is actually fulfilled when the asynchronous call is completed. So I personally wrote many tests like that, especially as far as using Objective-C and mocking is concerned, because I'm not that experienced with unit testing, and actually, the reason why I talk about is another slide. We can move on. I wanted to find a solution for this problem, and the solution was mutation testing. So do you know mutation testing? Do you do it at work? So the idea is that you have a set of tests and your code. So you want to check if the tests are actually checking something. So you intentionally introduce some mutations. So for example, you change some mathematical equations, or you put success instead of failure. And then again, you run your tests, and then you check if the tests detected the mutant. If the test failed and they detected that something has changed, it's good, because the tests actually check application's logic. But if the test will pass anyway, it means that you wrote an evergreen unit test, which is pretty and green, but it doesn't check anything, actually. So every time I see green report, I'm asking myself if I really wrote a good code or just shitty unit tests.
OK, so let's move to another layer. So probably most of you have seen this view. It's a div of XML interface builder file. And when you code review it, it's super hard to read. It's super hard to know how the views lays out on different devices. And to test it, you need to run the code, the application on multiple devices. Or you can use the preview function in interface builder, but all the view needs to be defined over there. So this process is really slow. The iteration is really long. So we wanted to find a tool that will make this faster. That's why we use a Facebook Snapshot test case. And it works really great for us. It's open sourced by Facebook. And how it works, it renders subclasses of CL layer or UI view into PNG files that are saved into the repository. And later in time, if some developer makes a change, the Facebook Snapshot test case takes this view, renders it into PNG files, and compares this new PNG file with the one that's saved on the disk. If the view changed, the test will submit a failure, but if nothing changed, it will be green. This has another benefit. These PNG files we can send directly to our designers, product owners, and they can check if everything is OK. At Allegro, we both support iPad and iPhone apps. And we just don't want to scale the views from iPhone to larger screen on iPad. We actually want to use the larger canvas and show more content to the user. That's why we snapshot test always compact with size classes and regular ones. At Allegro, we also care about accessibility. So we test our views against different dynamic type sizes. And this has another benefit. As you can see on the right, we can see how labels are truncated when there is not enough space to show all the content. And to show you a little bit of code of how we are doing this, unfortunately, Apple doesn't provide an easy way to mock size classic dynamic font sizes. So we need to come up with some hacky ways to do it. So to mock size classes, we firstly need to get our view controller that's under test, add it as a child to some wrapper or parent view controller, defines the traits that we want to use. In this example, it's vertical size class and horizontal size class, and calls it override trait collection on wrapper view controller. To mock dynamic font size, it's a little bit complicated because in our approach, we are using dynamic features of Objective-C and OCMock library. So we're stubbing the UI application mock with, and we are stubbing the preferred content size category method, and we are returning the dynamic type size that we want to test against. Since we started using Facebook Snapshot test case library, we hit two major technical problems. The first one was merge conflicts. So as you can see on the right, this is the view controller that shows the item page where user can buy this item. And as you can see, this view controller is pretty big. It contains from multiple sections, which contains from multiple views. And when starting doing this, our approach was to snapshot test every view and every view that consists from other views. And imagine a situation where two developers are working on different sections on this view controller. They submit pull requests, and both of those pull requests are containing snapshot tests for sections, but also for this really big view controller. If any of those pull requests gets merged firstly, it will create conflict for the other one. And we had sometimes periods when there was lots of developers working on this view controller, and it was really painful sometimes to solve every time those conflicts. So that's why we decided to drop the snapshot testing for these big view controllers, but it also generates a risk because sometimes the sections can be laid out differently, and we needed to test it separately. The second major problem we had was the size of the repository. To give you a little bit of insight, our view controller that we showed on the slide before, it's a separate module that we keep in our internal Cocoa pod structure module as a pod spec. And for example, this view controller a snapshot test for iPad had over 5 megabytes. And with time, our snapshot could grow to over 2 gigabytes in our repository. And if we wanted to update our module that shows offer item in our main app for buyers, the Cocoa pods are downloading the whole repository. And sometimes it could take really longer time to download over 2 gigabytes. That's why we use a tool called BFG Repo Cleaner that's recommended by GitHub. And we just cleared our Git history from PNG files that are no longer necessary to keep. Unfortunately, around 1 week ago, the main contributor to this repository announced that Facebook is no longer using it. They have another internal tool for it, and they moved the library to Facebook Archive organization. He promised that they will provide a better owner for it. Let's hope that's going to happen really soon, because we are depending on it, many people are depending on it, and other organizations.
Great, so we are halfway. We hope you are still with us. Let's move to the next layer, which is functional tests. So in Allegro, we work in quite complex environment. Our service consists of around 500 microservices, and they communicate with around 25,000 events per second in the peak time. So you can imagine that there are many projects going on and many teams working simultaneously on many different things. So change is our bread and butter, and by change I mean new features, some bug fixes that needs to be introduced, and so on. By the way, this GIF It's actually showing the real data. That is why it's so blurred, because I couldn't show the API address and so on. So this working with a an environment that changes a lot has some difficulties, because the system is so complex and because the communication is not perfect all the time. We sometimes suffer. For example, some change introduced on the backend or some on web application influence mobile application in undesired way. We were thinking how we could monitor these kind of things, how we could react as quickly as possible. So we thought that the answer for that question can be functional UI tests that monitor if something has changed within the time and we didn't know about it. That's why we introduced some functional tests in part of our application, and they connect to actual test API and they check what is how application reacts on some potential changes. And that was the automatic check we wanted. And every time the tests fail, we get notified and we can react accordingly. Because the functional tests talk to real environment, they take more time. They are a little bit slower, so it's good to put them in a separate test target. And also in time, we noticed that some of the tests are flaky. And I'm not sure if you have met flaky tests in your daily work. So these flaky tests are tests that fail randomly. They sometimes pass, they sometimes fail. So you can actually you cannot trust test results anymore, because they sometimes pass, sometimes not. And they hinder the development and they hide real bugs, and at the end they cost money because you spent so much time on fixing them. So we were thinking, what is the reason why our tests are flaky? And it appeared that actually our test environment was not stable enough to have a good. So we could not use it on the functional tests. That's why we skipped the functional part and we just did UI tests. We used stopped requests. What I mean by stopped requests, so first we made the request to the API, then we recorded the response, we saved it in the repository, and then during the test we were using it, so we didn't have to communicate with the real API. So in this way, tests were more reliable, less flaky, and so much faster. We knew that this kind of approach brings risk of using outdated API, because if we are only using the stopped requests that are saved in our on our repository, we didn't know if something has changed within actual API. That's why we introduced scheme verification. So we have the JSON file that includes response. Based on that information, we created JSON scheme. Scheme contains information about the structure, variables presence, and their types. Based on D2, there is configuration file, which is input for actual validation. In this way, we are sure that the stopped requests we are using are up to date. So every time the UI tests are running, the actual scheme verification is run as well. So we are then sure that the stopped requests are up to date. But at the same time, we are struggling with a quite slow growth of test coverage, because there are many things to do. You have to record the responses, then you have to validate the schemes and so on. So within this approach, we are actually struggling with this issue, but we hope we will overcome it and we will find some nice solution for it. I'm personally excited about the talk today at 2 p.m. in the Mobika room, where there will be presentation about from zero to hero in UI tests. So if you are also interested, we probably see each other there.
Okay, so the next problem we experienced was late feedback. At Allegro, in iOS team, we work at 3 different cities, and the team is quite large. And sometimes in the team of that size, there are communication issues. And to give you a little bit of example how it can look like, this is a fake example. Imagine that your product owner asks you to change the selected color of a tab. Okay, so the developer takes the ticket, tries to execute it, but actually in an application we have 2 tabs. We have this bottom bar and this top bar control. And the developer may assume, okay, it's for sure the product owner meant the bottom one. So the developer changed the bottom one. But actually, it was the other one. So that's why our develop branch is always ready to be deployed to our beta as a beta application to Crashlytics beta tool. That's part of Fabric now. So later, the product owners, designers, or actually any employee at Allegro can download the app to their personal devices and test it. To give you a little bit of insight how we are doing this, internally we use Bamboo continuous integration server. So any developer can go there, run a plan, then this plan will execute lane. That firstly will execute match action, that will download our provisioning profiles and certificates. Then we will build the app using gym action that will use those files provided by match. And then if everything succeeds, we'll deploy the app to Fabric. And we are doing this on business demand. So it would be looking like product owner comes to me and, hey, I want this app to test. And we will just, some developer will deploy it to Fabric.
Great, so let's move to another layer. So we test in laboratory conditions. Laboratory, I mean, we test in our office, sitting by the desk, connected with a good, like having good Wi-Fi connection. So we are using test cases. It's really hard to use like real use cases. Of course, we think about it, but sometimes it's really hard to reproduce it like really, really deeply. So some time ago, we introduced a feature that was synchronizing locally stored data to the backend. And we implemented, tested it carefully. That's what we thought, at least. But then we saw many comments like that our application crashes. And it sucks, actually. So, of course, we were very sad, because we thought that, OK, we tested and implemented it like we did our best. But apparently, there were some users on production that were having hundreds and hundreds of items that were supposed to be synchronized to the backend. And we didn't even think about this kind of situation. We were not aware that there are that many heavy users having that many items. So we were thinking, OK, so how we can actually reflect real users' intentions, real use cases. So during this year, WWDC, there is a new feature for App Store called Phased Release. I'm sure that some of you are already using it in your apps. So the idea is that you can roll out the application only to the part of your users. So then if you have any problems on production, you can just stop rolling out application to the users and you can react accordingly. And if there's some crash, it will not propagate and it can be fixed. What is worth mentioning that it works only for automatic update. So even though, for example, during the second day, you have only 2% of people that have automatic update, the other part of people is still able to go to App Store and update application manually. So it's also worth mentioning. So do you know how this kind of approach for releasing is called? It's connected with small bird. It's a canary release. It's coming from the British mining history, where the canaries were used as an indicator of carbon monoxide. So they were put to mines, and they could warn the miners that something is going on, so they could evacuate quickly. Of course, like in phased release, we are not saving lives, but maybe our salaries, at least.
Okay, so let's move to another layer. Another layer of our onion. So on this screen, on this slide, you can see 3 screenshots from our app. They're looking pretty the same, but there is one big difference, the placement of cart icon. And when the user taps cart icon, we'll show to the user the list of items that the user can buy, or part of items that the user can buy. And this feature is really essential to our business. It's really essential to our user. And it's before shipping, we actually don't know which version will perform the best. So that's why we are doing A/B testing at Allegro. And how A/B testing works. It works by deploying all those 3 variations for this example to the production at the same time. And then we use a tool called Optimizely to measure the performance of each variation. So the data on this slide is fake, but this is how the simple report for Optimizely can look like. We can see how many visitors, how many users have seen each of those variations. But what's more important, we can see the conversion rate. And for this cart icon placement experiment, the conversion rate, for example, could be the number of checkouts for specific car icon placement. So from business point of view, the best card icon placement would be the placement for that had the highest number of checkouts. And we'll be running such an A/B test experiment until we'll collect statistically significant result, and then we can make a data-driven decision that would be the best for our users and our business. And stay tuned, because this A/B test will be rolling out soon in our application. And maybe you know, but Facebook is also really famous from their A/B testing practices. Recently, there was a very interesting experiment, social experiment in Twitter started by Luke Wróblewski. He asked people to submit screenshots of their bottom tab bar to shared Google Docs document. And as you can see, there is lots of variation of this tab bar. He counted that it's at least 54 versions, but I think this document is many more. And with so many variations, it's hard to think still about that this is still A/B tests. Maybe they are using some algorithms to actually adjust the app for specific users. Maybe that's the future of mobile. So let's move to the last layer. So we built our app, we are happy, we deployed it to the production. Users can download it, but we have still one question. If the users are really using our features that we've built, and if the users are happy with those features. We just don't want to build the product the right way, we want the right product. So, like, App Store reviews can measure some happiness of the users, but we still have lots of one-star reviews that says, for example, useless. You know, we know that the user is not happy, we know that the user is frustrated, but we need contact with this user. We need to talk with them, we need to ask about their problems, we need to know more to improve. Yeah, maybe. So that's why we do usability testing at Allegro. We actually invite real users to our office in Poznań, and we ask them to go through critical paths in our application. So that would be buying an item, selling an item, searching for an item. And we ask them questions like if they like it, if they don't like it, if we improve through time, or we ask them about their ideas. And what's really cool, every Allegro employee can sign up for such an usability test and observe the users going through our critical paths through one-way mirror. And we invite different kinds of groups too. So it would be young people, it would be older people, people that's very experienced with Allegro platform, and people that are less experienced. And this is a really big event. It happens every 3 months, and there is a really large report generated, written, so every Allegro employee can read it. But also we do very small usability tests. So it can be, for example, a UX researcher that goes to Allegro corridors in the office and asks randomly some person if they do like the new features, if they like new mocks or anything. So we are very happy with this, and every issue is then converted to a ticket, and then product owners are making a decision if this should make to the production or not. So we talked about these 8 problems that we had, and we are still having them. We presented to you the solutions that we came up with. We're still working with better solutions. There are new problems every week, and we come up with more solutions. This is an ongoing work. We hope that you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you very much. And we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
I'd like to ask whether you are using Xcode UI tests, or have you considered using them, or did you have any problems with them?
We have tried them, and the reason why we actually use keep it functional. We use it because you can actually access the code of application as itself. So if you need to do some preparation, like some pre-tests, preparation for the test, like you can definitely do it with KIF, but with the Xcode UI testing, you have only the UI accessibility protocol that is actually accessible to you. So it was more comfortable for us to use KIF, and actually it reflects all our needs, and that's why we are still using this library. But of course we have checked the Xcode UI testing, especially after this year WWDC, which showed quite nice results. to add something?
No, that's perfect.
Does it answer your question? Yeah? Okay.
Hello, I have two quick questions. First, do you randomize A/B tests on backend or locally? I mean, when you selected version to show, do you get it from backend?
It's actually a flag that's sent by Optimizely to our app, and we can, for example, set we have this card experiment with 3 variations. So we can set 33% will get this version, 33% this version, and 34% this version. But we can always go to the panel at Optimizely, change the value, the percentage, and it will reflect on production.
Okay, second question.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
What do you do to not have if-driven development when you have such flags? Do you have some specialized components for the views you're testing?
For the views only. View controller. So, but you're asking about like a view component library, or you ask about some.
What do you do to not have if everywhere? If flag, then do this.
So you ask about A/B testing mostly.
Yeah.
So as I said, like we have lots of internal modules, and we have some protocols that actually the views can conform to. So for example, in our offer view controller example, we can have some view that conforms to this protocol, and the protocol, the information will be passed to the module, and the view would be shown or not based on the result of the experiment. But the view doesn't know if it's a card icon A/B experiment. It does only know that it may be shown or not. So that's it.
Okay, so you said you do continuous delivery with Fastlane tools and Fabric. Do you use Xcode server or Xcode bots or something like this?
No, we use Bamboo that just executes the Fastlane with Ruby that's installed on our server inside Allegro, and yeah, that's it.
Okay.
I have a question about the usability testing, because you said that once a while you are asking the users to come to your office, right, and do some actions. Did you think about, or maybe you are tracking the users' actions inside the applications, and during one single session you can see which screens are users visiting, one after another, and maybe the dead parts inside the detect the dead part inside the application after introducing new feature, so you can see how if users are using the new features in a way you wanted.
Yes, that's a good question. We didn't say anything about it actually, but we definitely do it. It's more like the data that is coming from some analytical libraries is being analyzed by the team, by the analysts, and we are always showing the analytical data before each demo, so we know how the feature is being used, or it's just like people.
So at the end of every sprint, we have an internal demo of the features that we delivered through this 2-week process. So actually, whole company is invited and can join us. And we, for example, show that, okay, 2 sprints ago, this is like the business part of demo. 2 weeks ago, we delivered this feature, and our product owner will show the plots of how it's being used, how many percentage of people use this feature, if it was successfully used by, for example, measuring our success case, like what we think it's the success. Because our app is heavily analytically tracked. Yes.
Yeah, but the idea is that we need some quality data. So we know that the user is actually using the view, but we don't know the feeling.
So do you have some success metrics after each project?
Yes, the success is usually connected with the financial issues. So it's usually some knowledge that is like somewhere in the business. For us, the success is, for example, when the feature is stable and it doesn't crash. So we of course track it via Crashlytics. It's also for Fabric. So we always do these kind of analytics, and of course the business do their own job, so they are checking if it's okay. If not, like the crashes, even if they are not present, it doesn't help.
How much A/B tests you have in the same time, in average?
It depends. It depends. But actually, I think I remember we had 3 in one time. I think that was the most. Am I correct?
I think so. Yeah.
And one more question, which tools do you use to analyze crash reports, Fabric or?
Fabric Crashlytics.
So I've got a question. Do you connect in the final build to Crashlytics or only in testing internally?
So when we release the version, we usually do beta testing via test flight.
Yeah,
So
it's connected or?
Yes, it is. Definitely it is, and we always, before releasing, we are checking it regularly to see whether some crash is going on. If yes, we are then.
So the Fabric slide we show, it was the enterprise deployment. So it's different from the beta deployment where we can invite people outside of the Allegro organization. So this beta release is mostly experiment one to show to people at Allegro the new features, if they like it, if it looks as it's supposed to look. And so beta, the test flight one we do just before deployment, and it's
Before the actual release.
so it's it's a different one.
Let's thank you to the speakers.